Well, here we are back with episode number 2. Got a lot to go through this week. And, I'm hoping that we'll do one once every week. But the news and the events of the day will sort of drive that. It's not possible maybe to do it every single week since we're just starting out and trying to get our show together. But the first thing you should do, I'd like to say, is to, like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification button, and take a look at all the links in the description where our social media is: YouTube, BitChute, Gab. Parler is still not back yet, but we're also on Facebook and whatnot. And I will link to everything today that I'm going to talk about. It's going to be a little bit drawing a thread, if you will, through a needle in a way, because the new numbers are out in North Carolina about what is going on in our education system. And I want to start off with this piece by the EdNC, which is a website in North Carolina. And this is a recent piece, and I just want to flow down here for you for just a minute. The reason why I want to bring this up is because it sets up a little bit about what I want to talk about today in terms of what's happening in North Carolina. It's not going to be strictly about education per se, but we're going to be able to draw some conclusions, some of the consequences that are happening in the state that are going to affect education in the coming years. Actually, some of this stuff, some of these trends we're seeing right now. So anyway, let's look at this piece of what's happening in this. What's happening this school choice week. This is obviously a fairly recent piece, January 25th. And let me go down here. And as you can see here, they talk about the numbers, which is what we're going to get into next. So hold on here. Let me just read this for you real quick. Traditional schools, public schools, remain the biggest option for North Carolina families, according to the State Department of Public Instruction, or DPI. Their statistical profile. North Carolina has about 1.5 million students. Drop down here, and we can see charter schools. If I can highlight it, charter schools here are also up. And their statistical profile has students enrolled in the charter schools of 2020 at just over 120,000. Now, if you look at also right here, private schools in the state are at roughly about 104,000. Now, let's take a look at this. I want to look over the last 3 years. This is these are the numbers that were just talked about here for the public schools up here, 1.5 million. And you can see that in right here, year ending 2018, I want to go through the last 3 years because this is important. Through 2018, there was 1.48 million students in the schools, in public schools, district schools. Excuse me. And the next year, 2019, right here, you see in the statistical profile, 1.469. Okay? Now, let's look at 2020. 1.458. So the point here is that in the last 3 years, it's modest. It's not a lot. But in the last 3 years, since 2018, 2019, and now the last year that we just ended, I just got the numbers for 2020. Numbers have been dropping consistently in the public school system or the district school system. Now, if you look at charter and regional schools here, you can see that, or the highlights as I run my mouse over it. Let's go back to 2018. We'll do the same thing. And here we have 120. Oops, didn't work. There we go. 2018, 103,667. 2019, 114,000. 2020. There's your 121,260 right there. So the point that the district schools are declining in the last 3 years. We see charter schools are increasing in the last 3 years. All right, next. Now this is a little bit. It's gonna blow a pop up here for me, so just be patient as I click through this if you can. But if you're gonna have to take my word for it here because this will open a new window. So the number for private schools, K through 12, will do the same thing. 2018 is 101,775. Now, if you look here, this one pops in. pretty easily and doesn't download. So we had 101, 775 for 2018. This is 2019, as you can see here, the report from North Carolina. And you'll notice, by the way, that it's in a different division in the political structure. It's in the Department of Administration, which is essentially the governor's office. And here you see the total private schools, 102,400. Okay? Next, the last year for private schools, see, 2020, Department of Administration, 103,959. So district schools are declining, although they have a lot more. They have over 1 million students, but they're declining in the last 3 years. Charter schools rising in the last 3 years. Private schools rising in the last 3 years. Now, let's look at homeschools. Once again, these, I think each one of these will go ahead and pop in for me. So here we go. 86,000 homeschools. 86,000 people were homeschooled, children homeschooled in the year ending 2018. 2019, year ending 2019, 90,688. Now 2020, 94,863. So I have it written down here on my list. I don't mean to look away, but the homeschools have been increasing as well, from 86,000 to 94,000. Private schools, 101,000 to 103,000. Charter schools, 103,000 to 121,000. And the district schools have declined by roughly 30,000 students. Now, some people believe that this is because what's happening in the state is COVID. Perhaps it's COVID. And the reason why I wanted to go back to 2018 is because I don't think it's because of COVID. I mean, it might have something to do with it here between 2019 and 2020, or in the year 2019 to 2020. But this is a trend. So that's why I wanted to go back to 2018 so you could see the trends haven't really been upset. I think there's a larger problem, or a larger thing going on here in North Carolina. And I'm just going to tick through a couple of stories here. And then I'll read something that I wrote back in 2019 about this very problem. When people were all upset, actually in Raleigh, North Carolina, they were all at Twitter about the decrease, if you will, or the lower than expected increases in children attending district schools. The bottom line in some ways of this is that the district schools are a little bit worried about what's going on because they are decreasing. Now they're just saying that it's because of COVID, but I really don't think it is. So North Carolina, you can see here, this is from 2017. And by the way, I save everything in Archive. I don't know if you know about this, but Archive today, 1, your posts aren't going to go away. 2, they're not going to be manipulated or taken down. And 3, legacy media like the News Observer and whatnot get money from people when they view their websites. So I use Archive to make sure everything is preserved, for one, and that you can get them for free and not have yourself tracked. So Archive is a great place to go. Therefore, everything you'll see today, I'm using through the Archive site, and this is all the way back to 2017. So the census in North Carolina population is getting older and more diverse. Now I'm going to show you some detail on that in a little bit, but I just want you to know that North Carolina population is getting older, which means, or it does have some sort of effect on schooling and school populations in North Carolina. You can see here that the next story, and this is from 2018, December 26th, Wake County usually grows by thousands of students annually. This year it grew by 42. This is the one that I sort of mentioned a little bit earlier, that Wake County, or Raleigh, North Carolina, was a little bit worried that students didn't show up as much as expected. Now, this is just in Wake County. They grew in Wake County, but overall, remember in this year, and I showed you back in 2018, they began losing students in the district schools. So that's statewide. Next is people are moving to North Carolina in droves during the COVID pandemic. So yeah, you might think that, well, yeah, maybe people, are gaining in not necessarily district schools, because I've showed you that the numbers have gone down, but they are increasing in other ways because people are moving here and they're sending them into educational alternatives like private school, charter school, and whatnot. I'm gonna sort of challenge that understanding because of the decreases that we've seen along the way since 2018. I'm not so sure COVID pandemic, even though people are moving here, has contributed to anything to the decline, or even the schools being shut down in the state has contributed to those removing their students or removing their children from district schools and placing them someplace else. There could be some numbers that certainly show that, but I think this is an overall trend. The next thing here, as you look, is News and Observer again, 2020. North Carolina Metro was number 1 in the country in growth. So most of the people who are moving to the state are moving to the metro areas. So usually Raleigh, Charlotte, and maybe some of the others. I mean, you're going to see, if you really drill down into it, you'd see a lot of people are moving into Wilmington. Are these people moving here have school-age children? See, that's the big question, and that's the question I'm going to try and answer for you here in this short video. NC counties with the biggest population losses are all in the Northeast. There's not everybody is gaining in North Carolina. There's only certain places that are gaining, and I've already noted that back here. It's the metro areas, usually bigger cities, if you will. But there are areas in the state which are they're shrinking, to be quite honest with you. Okay, so let's talk about what might be going on here. Long time ago, I wrote a piece, even though it was never published, but I just published it here, the real problem with Wake County. And I go through, going all the way back to that story that talked about Wake County only growing by 42. I jumped off that when people were saying, well, it's because there's people moving to the area and whatnot, and there are other reasons other than people just taking themselves out of the system for that. Now, it's true that so there are a lot of people who are moving from the district schools into the charter schools in particular. But I still think that there's something else going on here. There are certainly parents doing that. But so let me just, without being boorish, let me just read here that we might look at this in a little bit. Between that Wake County will only gain 100,000 in population. So this is the nub of the whole thing. Stagnant school district or district school enrollments have nothing to do with the rise of charter schools. While it's true that charters increased in Wake County by 1,532 students from 2018 to 19, homeschool statewide increased by nearly 5,800. Wake's population of that grew by 644. More astonishingly, private school enrollment grew by more than 1,000, with Wake County accounting for 701 of that increase. In other words, Wake County is responsible for 60% of the growth in public education, private education in the state. What is going on that might account for the stagnating population and the simultaneous increase in parents leaving the public education or leaving public education as a whole? District schools might want to look at what they're doing to drive parents away from their schools, but as we all know, that probably won't happen. Given the aging and stagnant population realities in Wake, any shift in distribution of school enrollments is the result of those who remain in the county rather than those who are moving to the area. Other facts make the situation clear. Wake is becoming a one-party county. It is becoming richer in terms of household income. This fact is why the school boards have no plan to scale back in spending, and they don't, by the way. More public construction is on the horizon. On the surface, this might appear to be good news. However, the political trends in Wake are ominous. Raleigh is squeezing out the middle class, who are either leaving the county or fleeing the state. For a county where many are connected to the private sector, this fact could cause alarm, especially for the productive middle classes. Elites remaining in the county increasingly reject the public school option while declaring that others should not leave the fledgling system. Working class patrons who remain have only two options: leave the county or choose a charter. Either way, The trends show Wake is heading for gentrification, meaning less diverse groupthink will replace what was once a vibrant and affordable city, and I would say affordable county. This phenomenon is not heard. Think of Gucci. Expect more of them and less Chick-fil-A. But they closed a Chick-fil-A. They closed a Chick-fil-A in Raleigh some time ago. But if your county is becoming even more, is becoming richer, and you have people leaving the county, the lower class leaving the county, then what you have is a shift, if you will, not only in the way elections are done, but in the general culture of the city itself. So lower and middle class are leaving, therefore leaving the school system in especially Wake County, and it's becoming richer and more monolithic in terms of party. Now, that does have consequences for your education system, because the people who are elected to those boards, the people who are elected to the county commissioners, the people that are elected to city council are all going to be of one party, and so they're going to go one certain way. So now, why might this matter? Just hold on with me here. If you look at the back in 2018 when all of this started, the United Van Lines started talking about people who were moving in and out of certain states. And you can see those states where people are moving out of, and you can see, although it's really astonishing to me, people are moving into Oregon, which has been happening now for 3 years or more. You can see that many states are moving in states. And North Carolina, as you can see right here, is number 8. And that's been the case for a while. And the people moving out are from states that you might expect, states that have one-party rule, that have education systems that are not in great shape, especially in New York City. So the reason why this is important is because if you see what's happening in some of these other states and some of these other areas, wonder if it could happen here. If you go to 2020, and this is still the United Van Lines map, but I just wanted to pull up, give you some perspective that this has been going on for now 2-3 years, that people are moving out and moving in. So who's moving out and who's moving in? If you look at the current data for 2020, this is important and it should be interesting to you. The most of the people inbound, so you have inbound and outbound, most of the people inbound are doing so out of retirement. So people are retiring and moving here, 23%. There's not a lot of people moving here for health or for lifestyle, significant a little bit for family, mostly jobs though. But look how many people are leaving the state for jobs too. Now that's interesting in and of itself, and until you look at the age ranges. So to tie this all together here, if you're talking about growth in the education system in North Carolina, you would expect, or some people have said, well, it's because people are moving in. That's not necessarily the case, because the people who are moving in are going to be anywhere between childbearing age, around 18 to their 30s. Okay, so those people who are inbound in those age ranges are not a lot. They're not a lot. But look who's moving. Look who's moving into the state. People who are of, I would say, sure, retirement age and older. Most of the people coming in to this state are moving in post-children. Okay, so that makes all of this even more, these numbers even more grave, if you will. So I want to bottom line this for you, and I wrote down some notes here, but I want to at least give some sort of idea of what I think these trends mean, and some of the demographics that we just went through. And the bottom line is that school districts are aging. In other words, people in various districts, especially in some of the more affluent areas of North Carolina, are aging. They're getting older, which means they don't have children. But the school districts there, which are losing in students in some way or in some fashion, at least across North Carolina, are still getting money. And we'll go through that money stuff in terms of how much money they're getting and why in another episode. But at least right now you have a little bit of background on what's happening in the state. The second thing I would say is school districts are beginning to be more run by one party. This is especially true in the cities. especially true in larger metro areas. School districts are getting all the funding then that they need because of that. There's one party running the state in terms of education, then they're really not having much of a problem funding their schools. School districts are also catering to an ever smaller population. That is, that school districts are catering to a smaller childbearing, school-going population. Now, there's one other thing that you should note about this, and that is, if places like Wake County, it might not be in your county, you might be in one of those counties in the state that is losing population, because there are a few, especially up in the Northeast. You can see my squiggle here. Up around in here, they're losing population. But if you think about that, and then you realize that those people who are more affluent are taking their kids out of the school anyway and rolling them over into private schools, then they're out of the system in many ways. They might be pro-public school, but they've removed their own children from the system. So that could also be accounting for why you see a dip in the district school numbers over the last 3 years. So, but bottom line, most parents are choosing an alternative to their school, alternative school or alternative education system in greater numbers, which means they're leaving the system. Now, this, of course, could be exacerbated by COVID, but generally speaking, probably not, given the trends. It would be interesting, I mean, in all fairness, to see what happens in 2021, but we're a year away from figuring all that out. So in the state of North Carolina, in this episode, I wanted to point out that district schools are losing modestly, not a lot, but they've been losing numbers over the last 3 years. The alternatives in North Carolina, charter schools, private schools, and homeschools, I think, are really, really blowing up, are gaining. And there's a reason for that. But the bottom line is that the parents are choosing to take their children into alternative methods and modes of education. We'll explore some of those reasons in the upcoming episodes. And but before I go, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, leave a comment, please. Leave a comment, even if you're challenging some of these numbers or you have some other perspective. I definitely want to hear from you. And don't forget to check the link in the description and hang loose. We'll check you next time in episode 3.